Welcome to Networking Unleashed Building Profitable Connections, the show where stronger relationships create stronger results. I'm your host, Michael Forman. Today, we're stepping into a side of networking that doesn't get talked about enough. We usually focus on strategy, conversations, and follow up, but the truth is, how you show up in business is deeply connected to how you show up in life. My guest today works with men navigating careers, marriage, fatherhood, and the pressure of trying to handle everything at once. He teaches that mindset, responsibility, and presence don't just shape families, they shape leadership, credibility, and trust in professional relationships. We're going to talk about why past experiences affect how you approach people today and how emotional maturity impacts opportunity, and why the same qualities that bring a strong home, often build a strong network. So if you want better connections, better conversations, deeper trust and relationships that last beyond the transaction, you're in the right place. I'd like to welcome to my podcast, Mitchell. I'm really excited about what you have to offer my listeners. So, why don't you just introduce yourself and a little bit of how you got here today?
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate the intro and I appreciate being here today with your listeners. Yeah, a little bit about me. I'm a coach to high performing, career driven men who are, a lot of times I'll say, it's the men who want to reclaim their home, their health, and their happiness without sacrificing career success. So a lot of us fall into that trap of building the career, building the business, but then lose track of some of those things, like you had said, our marriages, fatherhood, our health, our mindset. And so that's largely what I do. How did I get here? I have a wild story of I came from, and I'll do this as quickly as possible, but I came from a background, a childhood of dysfunction. I was raised without a father in the home. There was a lot of alcohol, drugs, crime, abuse, all those different things. It was very messy. And I grew up to become a young man who got married, and I thought I had dealt with all that stuff, but within 3 years of my marriage, all those childhood wounds began to bleed into my marriage, and it paid the price. Michael, I was always in positions of leadership. It always made sense to me. Business made sense to me. But yet when I would come home, I didn't have the same skills. And I felt powerful at work, but powerless at home. And so my turning point, there were really two turning points for me. Is a lot of people ask that question, what made you do what you do today? And there was two. One was a fight, and the other one was a funeral. Okay, so the fight happened. It was me and my wife, and we were sitting in the living room and on the couch, and it hit the fan, and it spiraled, and the fight got quite heated. And we had fought a lot. Well, the first 3 years of marriage were difficult. I was going through a dark season, but this one was different. And I didn't know, like, I knew deep down if I didn't fix this, then divorce would just be around the corner. And to give you some more context, Michael, I had recently been let go of a senior leadership position. My career was everything. To me, it was my identity. So many of us men wrap our identities around what we do. And I spiraled, man. Like I ended up 60 pounds overweight. We were 100 grand in debt, now dangerously close to divorce. It was a very dark season for me. And though that week after having that big fight, I come home from looking for work, and I thought, man, as I parked in the driveway, is this the day that I walk in and I see the ring on the counter? It was that tense. The second turning point was 7 days later. I was invited to sing at the funeral of this wealthy man who's a philanthropist, and I was a professional musician as well. And so I'll never forget, there was about 2,000 people in the room, and I was getting ready to sing side stage. And as I'm preparing, getting my guitar and all that, I overhear the minister ask the congregation, as he talked about all the things this man had done, he had asked the room, are you living a life worthy of imitation? If you were to die today, would you be proud of the legacy that you left? And Michael, for me at that point, I had this huge wake up moment of, wow, if this were my funeral, and picture, I'm standing, I'm playing guitar, I'm looking at the casket of this other man, and I get this flash of where my life is headed. And I think, you know what, the answer to that question is no. No one would be looking at me if this were my funeral and saying, I want to imitate the marriage he had. I want to imitate the way he took care of his kids and his body and his and finances. Nobody would have said that. And so that day, Michael, I went home and I made a bold decision that I would die to the man that I needed, that I would die to the man that I was in order to become the man I knew I needed to be for my wife and for my family. I took ownership. And then there was a lot of things that happened that season, but over the next 18 months, I lost the 60 pounds. We completely paid off that 100 grand of debt, restored our marriage, and was free of distractions and substances and all that stuff. And then since then, man, dedicated my life. I started helping friends of mine because I was in leadership, and a lot of friends could see that what was going on, right? And they're like, man, what's going on? You're on fire. And so I started helping a lot of people, just building budgets or going to the gym, building plans for them, or helping them get closer to their wives. And until one of my mentors said to me, man, if you really want to live a life worthy of imitation, if you really want to have impact, you need to turn this mess into a message and share your story with the world. You need to start a podcast. And so that's what I did 2 years ago. And then from that came the coaching program. And then from that, here we are today. And that's what I do, man. I help the man I used to be. I'm a huge fan of Ed Milet. He says, you are the most qualified to help the person you used to be. And that's what I do today. I help high-performing men or career-driven men reclaim their home, their health, and their happiness, because that's who I was. So that's how I got here.
Great. That's great. It's a wonderful story. It's a success story. It's everything that a man, I'm saying it because that's the lane that you're in, but how a man can envision himself and whether he can do better for himself or not. And I think that we'll get into that a little bit further as we ask the questions. You talk about modern masculinity. How does a man's identity at home influence how he shows up in professional relationships?
Yeah, it's a great question. Let's talk about modern masculinity first, and then we'll talk about how his home life shows up in his professional life. I think we're living in an interesting time and age, Michael, where there's more polarization than ever before, and there's more confusion. I would say in the Gen Zs, we've never seen more confusion about what it looks like to be a man in today's society, what it looks like to be a strong, loving husband. And you think about on social media, it's either the hard one side of the pendulum where it's like red pill, it's toxic alpha masculinity, it's not great. But then you got on the other side, there's this sort of soft kind of weak sort of representation of masculinity where men don't really, they're the nice guy, they're very passive, they don't stand up, they don't really have a spine, and there's not really many people who are playing the middle ground. And that's because, let's be real, in today's day and age, clicks get likes, and likes help people get paid. And so why would I talk about something boring if I can talk about something polarizing? So let's have an extreme point of view, because it's going to get clicks. And what happens, though, is then cultural narratives begin to form. And so we've seen now more than ever a divide. Are you intense, alpha, like red pill kind of mentality? Or are you feminist and just very, you actually don't really know what your role is in the home? And so for me, the modern man is a beautiful combination of both, of understanding that, no, this isn't the 50s and 60s anymore. Roles have changed, and yeah, you're going to change a diaper. Yeah, you're going to be emotionally present for your family. But yes, you will also be strong when you need to be and stand up for your family. You are both strong like a lion and meek like a lamb. And it's a beautiful balance, but I don't think that many people even understand what that looks like. Now, how does that show up in work? I tell you, and people say to me all the time, how does this help my professional life? And I would say, when you become more emotionally available with your wife and learn how to hold space for emotions and connect with her on that level, when you learn to connect with your kids and be fully present and not be distracted, all those things, you develop those skills, you will be a more present, compassionate, powerful leader, because your staff, your employees will feel more seen, more heard, more acknowledged than they ever have been. And so these two it's not an either or, it's a both and it's a beautiful combination when you can dial in those skills at home, because they do translate professionally for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you hit upon so many things that I can't just take one of them and talk about it because you hit so many. We'd have a 3 hour podcast.
We would.
Um, so I agree with you wholeheartedly, every point that you just brought up. Many professionals try to separate personal life from business. Why do habits inside a marriage often mirror the habits inside networking conversations?
Sorry, can you ask that question again? I just want to make sure I answer it the best I
Sure.
can.
Many professionals try to separate personal life from business. Why do the habits inside a marriage often mirror the habits inside networking conversations?
Yeah, I think people try and keep it separate, and I don't know why. People talk a lot about work-life balance, and I've never liked the word balance. I think that's unachievable. I like this. I like the word work-life integration because work is life.
Yeah,
You spend 8,
yeah.
10, 12 hours a day there. Let's not just, let's call a spade what a, let's call a spade. And so for me, it's so important for us to understand that because what happens is we can fall into this trap of not fully being present when we're home because we're thinking about work, and then when we go to work, we're thinking about our kids at home, and we're never truly living this sort of integrated life, and where you're never really present where you are. You're in one place, you're thinking about the other. And so for me, I think that's such a valuable asset to be present where you are in the moment. So a lot of times with my clients, I'll just say, listen, be where your feet are. Right? Wherever you are, be there. And it's a simple phrase, but the more you think about it and the more you apply it to your life, it's profound because it's okay, be where my feet are. If my feet are in the nursery or if my feet are in my kids' room, then I'm going to be there with them reading the story. I'm not going to be distracted about something going on at work. I'm not going to be on my phone. If I'm in the kitchen with my wife, I'm fully going to be present and I'm going to be engaging in conversation with her as we're making a meal together. Same applies in business. Or be where your feet are. If you're in the middle of a boardroom, be all in. You know what I mean? Don't be checked out. Be engaged with the people who, whether it's your staff members, your employees, or whoever's listening, be fully present. Because now more than ever, I think attention is one of the greatest currencies we can give someone, we can invest into someone. Because we're living in a world there's so much noise and people get drowned out, right? Because whether it's we're hyper connected through social media, through work, through email. I literally just said this on a podcast episode that I released yesterday. The average person spends, was it, I believe it was 8 hours a day on a screen. 2 of those are social media. But here's another crazy thing. We we consume up to 140 newspapers worth of data every single day. So when you think about your parents or your grandparents and they'd sit around and read the newspaper once a day, that's one. We consume the equivalent of 140 of those a day because we're so inundated with data and information. What's the side effect of that? We're never fully present. We're never fully tuned in because we're being bombarded by digital deluge. And so it's so important for us to be present in both environments. And I think that's how they play together. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. And really, the key point that I took from what you said aligns with networking, and it's be present. No
Yeah.
matter where you are, be present. And that means if you're talking to somebody in a networking event or a one on one meeting or anything else, you want to be present and don't let any distraction come into it. An example that I usually give is when you're speaking with somebody and that you have that person walking behind them that you really wanted to talk to, and like your eyes are always darting, and oh, I want to watch where he goes because I want to get to him afterwards.
Hmm.
Trouble is, people don't do that. You have to stay in the conversation where you are. So you be present, finish that conversation, then you can go to the other person. But if you don't, that person you're speaking to now, he'll say, "Oh, he's really not interested, or he doesn't care," or, and I don't want to be the person that I don't care
Mm.
because I care about just about every conversation. Whether I put a high priority or low priority, that's up to me. But I
Yeah.
want the other person to feel present.
Yeah, and let's park there for a second, Michael, because here's the thing, and I talk about this often, but here's the message that you're sending. So if you're in a networking event and you're looking at some people behind them, what you're subconsciously, what you're saying is everything going on behind you is more important to me than you, right? If you're with your kids and you're scrolling your phone, what the subconscious message you're telling them is what's on this metal box is more important to me than you, right? When you're watching the game and your wife is trying to talk to you, trigger alert, that subconscious message you're sending your wife is whatever's on that TV is far more important than you. And these are not things that you would ever speak with your mouth, but they're things that your actions communicate. And so whether it's networking or at home, these are important because this is how it makes people feel. And it's becoming more and more rare to genuinely lock in with someone and make them truly feel seen and to feel heard and to feel like a priority. And so I say this all the time. The bar has never been lower. The bar has never been lower. Like it's so easy to be present because so few people are. And you give them your genuine attention and it's like it feels like a cold glass of water to someone who's dying of thirst. It's a beautiful thing. But I tell people all the time, I'm like, please work on this skill because it is one of the biggest things, one of the biggest levers you can pull if you really want to care about those who are in your life, whether personally or professionally. So I'm with you, man.
Absolutely. And this is where the old saying, action speaks louder than words.
Yeah.
And so your actions are everything. Your mindset matrix focuses on rewriting past beliefs. How do old experiences with rejection or criticism affect how someone approaches networking today?
You know what? That's a great question. And I think that's one that I talk about a lot with men because so often we find ourselves as men living in the past, right? So the mindset matrix is this three-dimensional look at your life. So the first, and it's backwards because everyone thinks we're always looking forward to the future and the past is behind us. But what we do in my work is actually we flip the model on its head. And so we start with the past and we redefine the past because it's so important because whether you realize it or not, your past is shaping your present and is certainly determining your trajectory in the future because up to 80% of the way you see the world and the way you see yourself is formed before you're 12 years old. And so we have these 30, 40, 50-year-old men who are still using these narratives that they adopted, these insecurities that they've adopted from when they were 10, 11, 12 years old, and they're shaping the decisions they're making today. And it sounds crazy to think that way, but that's psychologists would agree that's the way it works. And so what do? We begin with the end. We begin with the past, and we begin to speak to what happened to us and identify why we think the way we think, right? Because that informs our present decisions. And then we speak to our future and say, okay, now that we've recorrected the past, we're going to change that narrative so that we change our trajectory. The three-dimensional model is we redefine your past, we rewire your present, and then we reclaim your future, right? And so the reason why this is important because we all have these self-limiting beliefs. I don't care who you are. We have self-limiting beliefs. You are like some of us struggle with the imposter syndrome. Some of us struggle with self-sabotage because we believe these lies. Who would listen to you, right? Or you're not good enough to do this. Or you missed your chance. It's over. Or you're too old to do this now. For me, and let me share a little personal story why this is so important and so profound, is because, Michael, when I was growing up, so I have ADHD, and I was actually just diagnosed with this a couple months ago. And it all makes sense now. I grew up, and my family always said, your sister is the smart one. And she was 6 or 7 years old, but she was really older than me, sorry. But she was always really smart in school. But because my brain didn't quite operate the same way, I didn't do that well in school. I really struggled. And so I grew up thinking, you're not the smart one. And now I never really questioned that until I was about 20, I would say, no, probably about 31, 32 years old, where I was planning on launching a podcast. And then, sure enough, what happened? That limiting self belief came up. Who would listen to you? Why in the world should you start a podcast? You're not the smart one. That's your sister, right? And so, Michael, I spent 3 years trying to muster up the courage to do this and to launch the coaching practice. So, what did I do? Because I have ADHD, I had to do something and get it all out of my head. And so I sat and I wrote content, frameworks, systems, topics for 3 years. I have a Google Doc that has over 800 pages of content because I just didn't have the courage to pull the trigger because I was still wrestling with this limiting self-belief. Until finally when I did, so people were like, how do you get the content for your podcast? I got 2 novels worth. But that's what held me back. And until I really unpacked that and I called out the lies, right? And I spoke truth into them, it completely sabotaged so many parts of my life. And because of that, it took me 3 years to make the decision. I could have started a lot earlier. So that's why I think it's so important for us to do that. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. When I first started my podcast about a year and a half ago,
Mm-hmm.
and I went through, I'm a professional speaker. I go across the country and I speak on stages and everything. But when I wanted to start a podcast, I began asking myself, if I started a podcast, who's going to listen to me? Who would actually spend 20 minutes, 30 minutes, even 40 minutes listening to me? And after a while, my mentor, he said, Mike, just do it. Because the first one, listen, I've done over 100 podcasts. And if I went back to the first one, I go, I sound like that. But I started and I got better and better. But all I have to do is start. So that was my only holding back situation because I always felt I was good enough. I always
Mm-hmm.
felt I had the presence, but I was always thinking, who would listen to me? And that's what I
Totally.
had to overcome.
Yeah, you know what? If you don't mind, I'd love to share a framework with your listeners that can help with rewriting these limiting beliefs.
Sure.
So, what I've developed, because this is so common with so many people, even I work with career-driven men, high performers, but it doesn't matter who you are. Some of the most elite guys struggle with the same thing, and this applies to all genders, all walks of life, all positions. But it's called the clear thinking process. Okay, so clear, it stands for 5 different steps. CLEAR. So the first step, C, call out the lie. Okay, this is the story that you're telling yourself. So you literally would write that. The story I'm telling myself about blank is this. And you want to go into as much detail as possible. You might say, the story I'm telling myself is I'm just an angry man, or I'm too far gone, or I missed the moment. And that plays like a tape, right? It's not a truth, it's a tape that's playing, but we can hit stop on that. The second step in this process is, once we've called out the lie, is to locate the source. This is critical. So you might say something like, the people that have started this or reinforced this story, or the situations that reinforce this story are, and then you fill in the blank, right? Because the lie or the limiting belief may have come from a parent, a friend, a high school teacher, a bully, a colleague, could be anything. But it's important that you name it, because once you name the source, you break its power. The third step is CLEE, evaluate the cost. And this is probably one of the most important steps. And this is where we ask ourselves, what has living by this lie cost you so far? Has it cost you your peace, your confidence, your professional ceiling, whatever? And this phrase you might write is, the results I'm getting from telling myself this story are blank, and you fill it in, right? And it's important you feel the weight of that, not to shame you, but to get leverage to change it, because you're paying a price by believing this limiting belief. The fourth step is A, which is very important. Affirm the truth. This is where we flip the script, right? We write a new statement that is true about who you are. So the question you might ask yourself in this step is, what else could be as true, if not more true, than the story I've been telling myself. And this is so, for example, my story, this for me, the truth, because I was told I wasn't the smart one, the truth was I'm an intellectual. I'm focused and I have much to offer this world, right? And so I'm rooting that truth and directly negating the lie. The last step is R, which stands for reinforce with action. So this is where you don't just say it, but you live it. And this is the question is what are 3 to 5 negative thoughts, habits, or people that you need to maybe put pause on or remove? And then what are some actions that you could take, 3 to 5 actions that can negate that belief? And so for me, a major action to eradicate that limiting belief was actually to launch the podcast. Like you said, like you have to take that step, right? And so that process, the clear thinking process, is what I have all my clients go through when they find themselves in a situation where they start doubting themselves. They're about to go into a big meeting or have a conversation with a high level person where they start to feel that imposter syndrome creep up. But here's the thing. I love this quote from Carl Jung. He says, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So what we do is we take those unconscious thoughts and we bring them to the conscious mind, question them, change them, and then change our trajectory. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. Makes perfect sense. I like that also, by the way. And I'm saying this is good that this is video because otherwise I'd be writing down notes feverishly. In networking, people often try to impress. What changes when someone focuses instead on responsibility? What changes when someone focuses instead on responsibility and consistency?
Yeah, I think so many people focus on being impressive. And so what happens is you're having a conversation with someone and they're talking and you're thinking, how can I impress them? How can I be interesting? What's the next big thing I can say that will blow their mind and make them want to work with me or whatever the case is, right? And it's totally backwards. It's totally backwards. Because here's the thing. I do genuinely, firmly believe this to be true. It is so important for us to focus on being interested, not interesting. Okay? No one we know this old adage, no one cares about how much until they know how much you care. We think, how can it be interesting? So, no, it's not about you. How can you be interested in that person, in their life, in that situation, in this moment? Because the people that think, man, he's here, he's interested in me, that's the stuff that moves the needle. That's what leaves an impression, not your fancy revenue projections or the capital you raised or this business model you're about to release. And I think that's a trap we often fall into. And so I'm constantly telling myself that, man, don't be interesting, be interested. Don't be interesting, be interested. And I think that it can, whatever situation, whether you're working with a client, you're at a networking event, you're having a conversation with your boss, even, whatever, right? Like, it's such a powerful concept that I think so few people fully, maybe they understand. Like a lot of these things we're talking about, we intuitively get when you say it out loud. You're like, yeah, that makes sense. But the few who actually implement on that, those are the ones who really see an impact.
It's when you go to I'm saying a networking event, since that's what I'm all about, but you go into it with what's called a servant's heart.
Yes.
So you go in thinking what you can do for others, not expecting anything. And a lot of my clients, they say, well, I'm going to this networking event. I put some money down. I want to sell. And I'm like, no, that's completely wrong, right? You want to go in, you want to ask interesting questions, but go in with a servant's heart to see how you can. One line that I use more times than not is when I have somebody in a networking event and I hear everything. I have a bunch of things that I go through, but I say, how can I make you more successful? How
Yeah.
can I be a good referral source for you? And if I did my job correctly, they'll say, Michael, I don't know what the hell you do yet, and you're already trying to make me more successful.
Yeah.
And that's going in with a servant's heart. So if you do that, everything you just said all comes together.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think for that too, it's the moment, like even if you're thinking in the back of your head, what can I get out of this conversation? What can I get by being here? If that is the filter, I think you can smell that. You can sense that in a conversation. And what goes from what could have been a beautiful, beautiful interaction that leaves someone walking away feeling like you've invested in them or served them, it turns it into a contractual thing where it's okay, I'll do this, but as long as you do this for me, right? And that's not what you want. So there's this servant-hearted approach. I love that. That's what we're called to do, I believe, and to make relationships, to make people, to make the world better than when we left it. I agree with you, man.
Absolutely. And plus, it takes all the pressure off you, right?
Yep.
It takes everything off, and you can go in and have a good time. And that's
Yeah.
really what it's all about. You're being yourself, you're being present. All that comes in when you have that mindset. It's a change in mindset. And if you have that servant's heart, then everything changes.
Well, you think about it, Michael. Sorry, I just we were
No,
talking about this. It's such a good point. You think about how exhausting it is to be trying to listen to someone talk to you while simultaneously thinking, I got to say something great. What can I get out of this? What can I say that's really going to take me to the next level? That's tiring cognitively versus hearing someone talk to you and be like, man, tell me more about you. Tell me more
yeah.
about your business. What are you passionate? What's working for you right now? How can I help? That's just so much easier, right? So it's like, why not? It's a win-win.
Yeah, and people love to talk about themselves,
100%.
and so if you get to a conversation and have the other person talk about themselves, it's know you, like you, trust you, they'll do business with you. So that trust factor, when you're talking to them and talking about themselves, that trust factor, it's going up, and that wall between the two of you, that's coming down.
100%.
So it becomes perfect. Okay. For professionals feeling stretched thin between family and career, how can they build meaningful connections without sacrificing what matters most at home?
Yeah, that comes down to they this is the tricky thing that we all fall. I mean, this is a huge question because I think we all fall into this. We want to have a great home life. We also want to be successful professionally. We all want those things. And I think the answer is riddled or woven throughout the things that we've been talking about today. But I think it's so important for us to, because really what we're saying is how can we see success in it all? Not sacrificing career, not sacrificing family. And for me, that just comes to having strong boundaries in your life. I did an episode about this last week, just how we don't necessarily do an audit of our time and our energy. And so we give away our energy and our time to things that maybe aren't moving the needle or don't matter. And then we don't have energy for the career or for the business or for our families. I call them energy vampires. Vampires suck your blood, energy vampires suck your energy, right? And it could be relationships in your life that you're just, and we all know, like we all got those people when they send you, when you see a text come up, you're like, oh, here we go. Or you get a phone call coming, you're like, do I want to answer that? Whether it's energy vampires through relationships or whether it's through digital boundaries, right? I believe phones can be vampires, email can be energy vampires, all those different things. And so to set up boundaries to say, oh, I'm going to work, I'm going to shut down at this point. I'm going to close my laptop. And then another one would be digital boundaries, career boundaries, and relational boundaries are really important. The reason why is because if your energy is constantly drained, you can't give, like the man who's trying to do everything accomplishes nothing, right? He's just average at a lot of different things. So you're not going to see the success professionally. You're not going to see the success at home personally either, because you're never actually fully where you're not making people feel included and seen and heard and all these things that we've talked about because there's so much noise in our lives, right? And so for me, it's an exercise that I think your listeners will benefit from. I walk my clients through something called the life report card exercise because we fall into this trap of constantly trying to do too much, right? And you think about it when you were growing up, 4 or 5 years old, we start school. We go for what, over 10 years, 12 years, in school, and the whole objective is get straight A's, be the best in every area. We get out of there, we go to university. What's the goal? Straight A's, be the best in every area. So what happens when we get a mortgage? What happens when we get married and we try to maintain our health and we get a career and we have kids and we bills and we get all these different things? We'll get straight A's in everything, be amazing at everything. Problem is we try everything and we're successful at nothing. And so the report card exercise says, hey, I'm going to walk through the different subjects of my life and I'm going to give myself permission to be a B, maybe B minus or C plus. You might have to put something on the back burner for a season because it's not that important to you in this moment. For example, before I had kids, I would train 6 days a week in the gym. And I'd be there hour and a half. I'd sit in the sauna, sit in the massage chair. It was great. I could be an A plus in fitness. Now I got 2 kids. It's different. Hey, a marriage, business, all those different things. So maybe my fitness is a B plus. But hey, at least it's still on the report card. And there are going to be some things that you might, dare I say, you might actually have to give yourself an F in because this is not serving you and it's no longer serving you. So you're going to say, you know what? It's a fail and I'm not even going to try because I don't even know why I'm entertaining this in the first place. This relationship or the social media that I'm binging and wasting time. You know what? That's an F and that's fine. So give yourself permission to give yourself that accurate report card, and then that will free up space for the very few things that you want to be an A plus in. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. In business, at the end of the year, I see what worked this past year and things that didn't work. The things that didn't work, obviously, I got an F in, and I just get rid of it. I say, okay, I'm
Yes.
going to chop that off and I'm going to create something new and see how that works. So I
Mm-hmm.
do that. That's an exercise that I do at the end of each year around October, November. I start to think about it, and December I make those decisions. So yes, it's true. And I have 2 kids myself, probably a little bit older than yours, 31 and 35. But when they were growing up, look, I managed both their little league teams. So that was the decision I had to make. I could chase the dollar, or I can take the time off, be with my children, and manage the team. So I made the decision to manage the teams. So I didn't make as much money, but the the happiness I got from my children was you can't put a number on it. So that's what I
And I think that's the thing, right? We kill ourselves doing too many good things. And that's the thing, they're not bad things we're trying to do. I was talking about this with a client the other day, and I asked him the question, what good things do you need to remove from your life to make room for the best things? And only you know what the best things are. Is that old adage, good is the enemy of great is the enemy of the best,
yeah.
right? And so you can completely burn yourself out doing all really good things. And that's the tricky part. What gets your yes and what gets your no, right? And so get really comfortable handing out lots and lots of no's so that the things that you give your yes get all of you. And that's how you're going to see success both at work and at home.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Let's bring this podcast full circle. If someone wanted stronger relationships in their family and their business in the next 90 days, what's one mindset shift would make the biggest difference?
Yeah, that's good. You know what? And I'm tempted to just give you some strategy, some framework that I've created, but really the thing that's popping up to my mind is a quote that's just shook me like 6 months ago when I heard it. Time is the only currency that we spend without knowing the remaining balance. What that means is, Michael, I don't know if I have 60 years or 60 minutes left in my life. Now, if I live with that kind of awareness, how much different would I be treating those around me? If I knew that I have 6 days left, 60 minutes left, what would I say to those I love? How all those different things. So, for example, just share a personal story. My nephew was 18 years old and 2 years ago passed away in a drunk driving accident. And right before he put the keys in the car, he was sitting around a fire with his buddies. I don't think, obviously, he didn't know that he was living in the last 60 minutes of his life. But what would he have said? What would he have done? if he'd known that this is the last hour that I'm going to be on this earth. And so for me, Michael, time is so precious. And we give it away to the stupidest things, the most frivolous things. We waste it constantly. And so my challenge and my mindset shift that I would encourage listeners with is you don't know how much you have left. So spend it wisely. Spend it on the things that matter. You know what I mean? If you're at work, be where your feet are. Just connect with those people. Make them feel seen. Make them feel heard. And if you're at home, put the phone down. Talk with your kids. Talk with your wife. Make her feel like you're fully there, that she's cherished, or with your husband. And if you're a woman listening, make him feel like he's a priority. And I tell you, your relationships, your career, your own health and wellness will be much richer for it. And so that would be my encouragement, because once you do that, everything else gets better.
So I can't agree with you more. Everything you've said, everything you brought to light made me think of things that I didn't even think of. And
Mm.
I have made the decision where I am today. I went from being in the military to owning my own business to going corporate to going back to my own business. And every time I shifted, it was a whole mindset shift. But everything you said came into fruition. It's conjuring up memories and things, and you're just so on point with just about everything. Mitchell, how can somebody get hold of you if they want to be coached by you, if they want to say hello to you, or what's the best way for them to get hold of you?
Yeah, the easiest way is to check out the website. It's just dadnationco.com. Or honestly, if you just Google the Dad Nation, you'll see my face plastered around everywhere. You can just go on the website, and my email's there. There's a form you can fill out. Would love to connect with you. And whether it's just a candid conversation about where life's at for you, what's working, what's not, or if you want to take the step and actually work together, I'm happy to have that conversation as well. But really, at the end of the day, I've dedicated my life to helping 1 million men reclaim their home, their health, and their happiness through media and mentorship. And that's what I do. That's the two things, media and mentorship. And that's the simplest way. And I tell you what, I'll give your listeners a free gift if you're okay with that.
Sure.
It's just called the connection code. And it's a PDF. It's 50 questions that are designed to spark the fun and get the fire back in your relationship. Now, that's because the reason why I developed this tool is because we know that, for example, 80% of the main reasons cited for divorces today in the US is the main reason is not kids, it's not abuse, it's not cheating, it's not anything like that. It's emotional disconnection. And by the way, 70% of divorces in the US today are initiated by the women in the relationship, which is significant.
Yeah.
So what does that tell us? It gives us a big beacon that our partners crave emotional connection. And so these 50 questions are strategically designed to help connect with your partner on an emotional level, to go from feeling like roommates back to soulmates. Very simple. The only thing I ask guys to do is, hey, when you take her out on a date, pull 3 or 4 questions off the page and ask them to, or if you put the kids down, pour up a glass of wine, pull some questions off the page. And I'll tell you, Michael, I've had women email me the day later, the next day after a date, and I'd be like, who was this man who was asking me these questions last night? And the cool thing is there's stuff, everything from like your dreams to just fun stuff to intimacy. But you can actually, there's a big section on this list that you can use to ask your coworkers to connect with them, or to ask your children to be fully present. We talked a lot about presence, right? These questions will draw you into each moment. So you can just go to dadnationco.com/code, and you could download that for free, or I'll give you the link to it and you can put it in the show notes.
Great. That's great. Mitchell, this was great. This conversation is a reminder that networking isn't just a professional skill, it's a human skill. The
Mm-hmm.
patience, consistency, and presence that strengthen a family are the same qualities that strengthen business relationships. Take one action this week, choose one relationship at work or at home, and give it your full attention. A genuine conversation, a thoughtful follow up, or simply being present can change more than any technique ever will. If you found value in today's episode, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to Networking Unleashed Building Profitable Connections so you keep getting practical insight on networking and communication. And share this episode with someone balancing career and family and who can use it. If you'd help improving your communication, leadership presence, or the way you build relationships, visit forman.com to learn how I work with professionals, teams, and organizations. Mitchell, I want to thank you again for coming on my podcast. You were a great guest.
Thank you so much, Michael. It's been an honor and a privilege to be here, brother.
Well, hold on, folks. Don't go anywhere. Let's hear from our sponsors. David Neal, co-founder, Revved Up Kids. Revved Up Kids is on a mission to protect children and teens from sexual abuse, exploitation, and trafficking. They provide prevention training programs for children, teens, and adults. To learn more, go to revvedupkids.org. Henry Kaplan, Century 21. When it comes to making the biggest financial decision of your life, leave it in the hands of a proven professional, Henry Kaplan. Henry is a global real estate agent with Century 21, celebrating his 41st year in business. No matter where you're moving, Henry has the right connections for you. You can contact Henry at 561 427 4888. A huge thank you to our guest for sharing such incredible insights today. And of course, a big shout out to you, our amazing listeners, for tuning in and spending your time with us. If you're interested in my digital courses, being coached, or having me come and talk to your company, just go to Michael and fill out the request form. Remember, networking isn't about being perfect, it's about being present. So take what you've learned today, get out there, and make some meaningful connections. If you've enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with someone who could use a little networking inspiration. Let's keep the conversation going. You can find me on Apple, Spotify, Pandora, YouTube, or my website, forman.com/podcasts.